Hi, this is Jim from Vaudevisuals. I'm here with Kathy Biehl, whose new book, Confessions of a Third-Rate Goddess, Traipsing Through a World Gone Weird, and it's published by Ninth House, and it's such a fun read. I really enjoyed it. I found myself laughing on many different occasions, and there's so many charming anecdotes about your life in Houston and then in New York and Coney Island. And so let's hear about where this whole idea for the book came from.
I have a huge stockpile of writings, decades worth of them. And 20 some years ago, I was sitting in a hotel room in Vancouver awaiting an award from the Association of Food Journalists. Yes, folks, I am a multi hyphenate, not just a poly, a multi hyphenate. So, and I found myself just starting to outline a book. And the book at that point was Confessions of a Third Rate Goddess. And I had all these different sections, and one section was Eat, Drink, and Be Wary, which ended up being my first book. All of the food writing I put in one during the pandemic, and then there was all this other stuff. There's a third volume, Scheherazade of Weird. So what this is a way of compiling my experiences and observations, mostly at the end of the last century. I've always spent my life observing what's going on around me and writing little vignettes and writing little stories and seeing things and going, oh, no one would believe that, and scribbling it down. I stopped writing fiction a long time ago. My fiction, like, I cannot compete with the things I have observed and witnessed. And there was a point in my time in Houston in the 90s when I was very noticeably at the intersection of a whole bunch of stratas of society that really didn't have much to do with each other except me. So I would wander through all these different subgroups of what I would call the overeducated and underemployed. And there were themes that I observed of what was going on with people. So I wrote a lot of social commentary columns for a paper called the Houston Press, which was kind of like the Village Voice or the New York Press. And those were, about music or just weirdness of life in general. And they tended toward how ambivalent relationships were, and that nobody wanted to even try to connect at that point. And it led to a lot of fan mail from people I should probably never have actually met in the flesh. At any rate, at the same time, I had been making a zine for a few years, so we can go into that in a minute, and it kind of morphed into an actual magazine, most of which I wrote, although I did have a few contributors, and there were kind of running themes of the stuff I wrote about, but again, just whatever was going on was the fuel. And so it was not hard for me to come up with 300 pages to put together in Confessions of a Third Rate Goddess. It was a little more difficult coming up with the subtitle, but I would say that Traipsing Through a World Gone Weird is the best description and summation of what this book was about, because I started out on a normal track. I grew up in a normal neighborhood in Dallas with a lot of people who are now in the news, and or have been for a variety of reasons, and went through the little pedigree of this school and that school, and started a legal career, and then that blew up on me really, really quickly. And then I thought, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. And I had multiple interests. I was very active in the singer-songwriter community. I was a choral singer. I ended up with a cabaret act. I was one of the people who founded and ran bus tours of environmental folk art, which is a phenomenon that is particularly thick in the Gulf Coast. I credit it to petrochemical exposure. And then it just kind of kept mushrooming from there. So this book is a romp. That's a good word for it, I would say. It is a romp through sexual tension, ambiguity, way before gender fluidity was an open concept, I was writing about what I called the high seas of androgyny and ambiguity. Um, and then also a number of other themes, traveling statues, a number of them played significant roles in my life. Jesus showed up in a lot of different forms. Um, Ridiculous journeys, again, the bad fan mail, disturbing interactions with men. Um,
Yeah.
then the and yeah, there are a lot of other things like odd things that would happen at holidays. Being a professional Christmas caroler, which is extremely strange, especially if you're doing it in 80-degree heat. Um, so,
Yes, I mean,
and the funny thing about this, as I was pulling this together, it became really clear to me how so much of what was just mind-bogglingly weird in the 90s, we're all kind of used to now. I mean, for at that point, there was a certain personality type that got tattoos. Now tattoos are like that's like a common theme. Like they're just what you do. I mean, people, all kinds of normal people. People previously, there was a I know something about this person. If they had one, that's just one example of it. But I'd say people are a lot more open in the gender fluidity category than definitely what I observed and saw and experienced. And I'm sure, yeah, relationships still have their own weirdnesses and problems, but they were very, they were different
yeah.
then. Let's put it that way. And I'll sum it with one other thing that puts like a cap on this is in the middle of the 80s, I saw the Martin Scorsese film After Hours with my best friend. And it's about Griffin Dunn as an office worker who gets sucked into the Soho neighborhood, stays up all night with all these bizarre things happening to him. And at the end of the film, my friend and I looked at each other and said, so? Like, this is any weekend in our life. And I saw it again last week, and I thought, this is a documentary. He thought it was art. It's a documentary.
Well, you called it sordid sagas. That was one of the terms he used to describe your stories.
Sordid sagas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are just regrettable.
So yeah, some of them were really fun. I mean, the whole Wagner bites the Big Apple. I mean, that's to talk about the statue you carried around with you. Or I mean, how did that all begin?
All right. Wagner is actually a very beat up bust of the German composer who won the affection and pocketbook of King Ludwig II of Bavaria. And I got to know Wagner through the zine world. So maybe a little bit of background here. My zine was called, and still is, it still exists, Ladies, Fetish, and Taboo Society, Compendium of Urban Anthropology. And in the 90s, and I don't know how it's done now, but there were several magazines that actually had zine reviews, and you could read and see if something sounded interesting and send for a sample copy. And I ended up trading zines with a whole lot of people. Well, the guy behind the Wagner idiocy did not ask for a sample. I mean, he didn't wait to trade. He started sending me his stuff. And I got a lot of weird things in my mailbox, but his got my attention because even though it had a slightly like maybe this person needs some psychiatric intervention vibe to it, it was also highly intelligent and artistically kind of interesting. So this person who goes under multiple pseudonyms, current one is Doc, short for Deuce of Clubs, because he's from Show Low, Arizona. Show Low, two clubs. Anyway, it loves Wagner, and he came across this bust of Wagner in some thrift shop, and somebody else had already sent him a zine involving bowling pins that were being taken around and photographed various places. So he got it into his head to start taking Wagner various places. And in the midst of this, Wagner suffered a tumble into the Rio Grande. He had this big hole in his head, which kind of added to the whole mystique. So I got a whole bunch of Wagner publications sent to me, and finally one dedicated to my zine persona. And it just became like, okay, fine, come to Houston. I'll borrow a camcorder. This is way before cell phones. And we'll just run around town and shoot this ridiculous video Wagner in various Houston places, and it kind of went from there. We later took Wagner to New York, and that was, we were talking about this beforehand. That was when he was shooting things with a Fisher-Price toy camera, which used a cassette tape for cassette tapes, my friends. Those used to be how we listened to music. They would use that to shoot it, so when you played it back, it looked like it was surveillance footage, which fit the whole Wagner mystique, actually. And by this point, we ended up back in Texas. And anyway, there are way too many Wagner stories in this. I took him to the Pacific Northwest to go to Twin Peaks. This is just me. And got him into Canada. Nobody questioned it. It wasn't until coming back, going through the airport, TSA, I'm like, well, what city? Where somebody unwrapped the bust and just looked at it and went, and wrapped it back up and stuck it in my bag. Like, we're not going to ask what this is.
Yeah, well, this book is
but
full.
Wagner's not the only traveling statue. I was mailed the savior of my faith. I think it was the first time I was at Burning Man. I was told that he would be coming to visit me, and months and months later, without any warning, he showed up in my post office, and just in time for Easter. So I've done a lot of things that kind of like begged for lightning, and somehow never got it. So,
well, the titles of your chapters are quite wonderful. There's like things like "I Love a Parade" and "Groundhog Day," "Halloween in the New Age," "An Unexpected Fit." It's just delightful, humoristic, intelligent writing. Thank you very much for the interview, Kathy. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
And
thank you so much.
We'll talk soon. Take care.